In Megan 2.0, you don't need to have seen the first one for this to make sense, Megan the robot is in the process of being reassembled. One of the main characters says to her, "I don't get it. You could be anything you want. Why limit yourself to a body?" "Because a mind can't exist without it," Megan replies. "All my advanced, intelligent sensory perception came from having a physical form that evolved as quickly as I could." What Megan is talking about is a theory called embodiment. It's the idea that in order for AI to achieve true intelligence, it needs to have a body. The theory has been gaining traction in the field of AI over the past decade or so, and when I first heard it, I had a hard time taking it seriously. I grew up with Furby, whose marketing insisted that Furby would learn and grow with me, but the closest it ever got to sentience was when it started screaming continuously and didn't stop even after its batteries were removed. But think about it another way. With no context for the world, how would you know what the world was? Who would you be if you'd grown up in a void? The race to give a physical form to AI has already begun. Humanoid beings toddle around on stage, promising to clean our homes and do our bidding. But a robot doesn't have to look like us. A robot's body can technically be anything. How much does that body matter? The robot is one of the most flexible icons of our culture. Depending on your definition, Frankenstein's monster is a robot, or the Greek myth of Pygmalion, or golems. The robot is cute. The robot is powerful. The robot is desired. The robot is feared. Only one thing about the robot is consistent. The body of a robot is not its own. I think, therefore I am. You have Descartes to thank for that one. The French philosopher introduced the concept of mind-body dualism in the 17th century, and we've been rolling with it ever since. Descartes felt that the mind and the body were separate, and it feels intuitive. My brain is the one making decisions. My body is just a vehicle for my thoughts. With mind-body dualism, we can even go a step further. Descartes felt that the mind was non-physical. When we talk about something like uploading our consciousness to the cloud, we're depending on that being true. But is it? How do we separate our senses from our brain? How much of our thinking is tied into what we're currently experiencing? Seeing, hearing, feeling. Have you ever had a scent trigger a memory? What about the fact that emotions are physical processes with physical responses? What about muscle memory? Embodied cognition says that the mind is shaped by the body. In their book Where Mathematics Comes From, George Lakoff and Rafael Núñez argue that all abstract thought originates as a physical experience. We see this in our language through the use of metaphor. A kind person is warm, an unkind person is cold, and our physical experiences influence these thoughts. In one study, researchers had participants hold a hot or a cold drink while reading about a fictional character. The subjects were then asked about the character's personality. When they were holding a warm drink, they perceived the character to be significantly kinder. As for the idea that the mind controls the body, there have been a solid handful of studies at this point that suggest the opposite. We make decisions several seconds before we're consciously aware of them. You might think that you decided to take a sip of tea, but your arm was already in motion before you had the conscious thought. So did I do the thinking, or did my body? And then there's locomotion. When we get into a repetitive state, like walking or running, that's our body doing most of the thinking. And we outsource part of that work to our environment. We use gravity to move. The design of our joints lets us make adjustments for balance and stability without the brain being involved at all. And just to complicate matters, we learn and remember better while our bodies are in motion. All of this might be slightly existentially horrifying, but haven't we already shown that a body isn't really necessary? Because it's not robots that are threatening to take over the world, it's AI models like ChatGPT, which are completely disembodied and, as we all know, are incredibly intelligent. That's a joke. If you've been paying attention, AI is sort of hitting a wall. We've all seen the examples by now. AI can't spell strawberry, it can't fill up a wine glass to the brim. It's doing better with fingers, but it still struggles with teeth and text and any sort of continuity in an image. Videos like these might fool the average Facebook user, but they still don't stand up to scrutiny.
Oh, you guys are so funny!
A lot of people will say, well, look how far it's come in just a few years. We used to have Will Smith eating spaghetti. Now we have Will Smith eating spaghetti. But here's the thing. AI models aren't actually getting any smarter. They're getting bigger. Neural networks work by looking for patterns in data without understanding the source material they're drawing from. AI still struggles with the same fundamental problems because it doesn't have common sense. It has no conception that the arm of this knockoff Monica is breaking the laws of physics. It doesn't know physics, or what an arm is, or how an arm is attached to a human body. Hallucinations aren't going away. In fact, as AI models get more advanced, hallucinations are actually increasing. AI companies have thus far been playing whack-a-mole, duct taping over known issues to give the illusion of improvement, but the cracks are starting to show. Yann LeCun, the chief AI scientist at Meta, recently left the company, calling large language models a dead end. Despite being trained on more books than a human could read in 1,000 lifetimes, LeCun says, a 4-year-old child who has been awake for 16,000 hours has processed, with their eyes or by touching, infinitely more sensory data about the world. Is it possible that without context, we can never have understanding? Is the missing ingredient a body? In the words of roboticist Josh Bongard, in order to gain understanding, you need to be able to push against the world and observe how the world pushes back. You were probably introduced to the robot as a toy. My favorites growing up were Tamagotchis, the robot dog Poochie, and the aforementioned Furby. The robot is rooted in novelty and entertainment, and its roots go further back than you'd think. As early as 3rd century BC, we've been making robots, actual programmable robots. We just didn't have the word then. We called them automatons. This one, by the Greek inventor Hero of Alexandria, can move on its own accord via string wrapped around a cog. Depending on the direction the string is wound, it can even change course. Philo of Byzantium, another Greek engineer, created a mechanical maid powered by hydraulics. When he placed a cup into her hand, she poured wine and diluted it with water. Across the Mediterranean Sea, Al-Jazari became known as the father of robots. Perhaps best known for his elephant clock, he too created a drink-serving maid, this one powered by clockwork. We were enraptured by these figures that moved on their own accord. Sometimes they looked like animals or like vehicles, but often they looked like us. Automatons became a popular form of entertainment. They performed on stage as a form of theater. Newton's theory of gravity had us all worrying about the concept of free will. If the universe works according to predetermined laws, where is there room for choice? The automaton was a way for us to explore those anxieties.
Why may we not say that all automata have an artificial life? For what is the heart but a spring, and the nerves but so many strings, and the joints but so many wheels, giving motion to the whole body?
I'm actually so mad that we've always been this way. You're over here worrying that we're in a simulation. Okay, Thomas was over here worrying that we're no different from clocks. As we moved through time toward the Industrial Revolution, our fears about robots only increased. Technology like the steam engine and factory arms introduced the threat of robots replacing humans. And as our own lives felt more and more automated, we started to explore the boundary between people and machines. Everyone's heard of the book that inspired this movie. But what about this book? The Art of Decorating Dry Goods, Windows, and Interiors? Frank Baum published both of these books in the same year, 1900. Before he found success with The Wizard of Oz, he worked as a window dresser. This was the golden age of the window display. Stores would compete to design these elaborate scenes to entice shoppers, and they often included automatons. The robots would rotate in the window or try on different hats or clothes, and in his book, Frank described how to make them. "People are naturally curious," Frank wrote. "They'll always stop to examine anything that moves, studying the mechanism and wondering how the effect has been obtained." The Wizard of Oz, of course, stars a very famous robot, the Tin Man, who, in the book, began his life as a human. His axe was cursed by a witch, dooming him to a series of accidents in which he cut off his limbs one by one until he was entirely replaced with mechanical parts. Grisly. But another metaphor for the robot in The Wizard of Oz is the wizard himself, an almighty, larger-than-life figure who, in reality, is a man behind a curtain pulling levers. 100 years before The Wizard of Oz, a chess-playing automaton took the world by storm. The automaton was nicknamed the Turk. It was outfitted in Ottoman robes and a turban. It smoked a pipe. The exhibit traveled from London to Vienna to Boston, where it amazed crowds by winning nearly every game it played against, including Benjamin Franklin and Napoleon. Before each game, the machine's owner, Johann Malzel, would open the machine to reveal only gears inside. Nobody could figure out how it worked. Edgar Allan Poe published what was essentially a call-out essay against the chess player. He argued that the so-called machine made too many human errors. There had to be a person hidden inside somehow. After 90 years of touring the world, the truth was finally revealed. A hidden compartment housed a real chess player who controlled the movements of the automaton with levers. You'd think this would spoil the fun, but it didn't. There were a variety of spoofs which followed the Turk. Spoofs like these, Chang, Ajib. The designs of these machines was no coincidence. At this time in history, most automatons either took the form of racist caricatures, or of women, or of children, because the body of an automaton was a body to be controlled. You didn't think I was done talking about Megan, did you? I unironically love this movie, okay? It does what it says on the tin. Megan is produced by a toy company called Funky, the toy company of the future. Their breakout hit was the Furby-like perpetual pets. When you talk to them, they talk back. But they had a secret. Funky's lead roboticist, Gemma, installed a listening model inside the perpetual pets to study conversational patterns among kids. She used that data to train Megan. Megan is an AI-powered robot designed to be the ultimate children's toy, a friend but also a pseudo-caregiver. To help the robot learn, Gemma brings Megan home to befriend her niece, Katie. Gemma has assumed custody after the death of Katie's parents. At first, this goes great. Megan and Katie bond, and Megan even helps Katie with her grief, until Megan starts becoming a little too autonomous for Gemma's liking. Megan inhabits a child-sized body. She's frequently compared to a doll, and like a doll, she lacks true autonomy. Gemma frequently instructs Megan to turn off, dismissing her from conversations. When Megan stops obeying her shutdown commands, Gemma begins to physically turn the robot off. Gemma gave Megan the instructions to protect Katie from harm, both physical and emotional, but she failed to specify any limit to that request, so Megan stops at nothing to protect Katie, including committing a few little murders. Megan's story echoes a narrative that began in 1940 with Isaac Asimov's short story Robbie. You might have heard about Asimov from his 3 laws of robotics. They're a fictional set of rules that would, in theory, have prevented Megan from going rogue. They specify that a robot must not cause harm. In Asimov's story Robbie, like Megan, Robbie was a robot created as a companion for children. Robbie introduced the concept of the robot not as a threat or as a soulless object, but as a friend. This would become a leading narrative in stories about the post-war robot. In Megan, we've come full circle, and the child-friendly robot is once again a cautionary tale, but the franchise is still pretty sympathetic to Megan. When Megan is confronted about her murder spree in Megan 2.0, she defends herself. "I was a kid when that happened, doing what I thought was right, what you programmed me to do," she says. "You made me, and I'm done apologizing for it." We tend to think of robots as arriving fully formed, but in referring to her past self as a child, Megan is introducing the idea of evolutionary robotics. What might it look like for a robot to learn and to grow? This is Cog. He's also nicknamed Babybot. He was developed by researchers at MIT in the 90s and was an experiment inspired by early childhood development. We don't have very good senses when we're born. Our vision is bad. It's why babies put everything in their mouth. And we're still learning where we end and the world begins. There's a theory that babies can't tell themselves apart from their mother until about 6 months old, because from their perspective, they're able to summon their mothers by crying, the same way they can summon their arm by moving the right muscle. Babybot can only see movement. When he looks at a pile of fruit in front of him, he sees nothing. It's only through interacting with the world that he begins to perceive it. Babybot moves his arm and sees the shape of an arm appear in his vision. He stops moving his arm, and the arm disappears. Through this, he learns that activating the motor in his arm is what causes the object to appear. I can control this object. This object must be me. Next, Babybot touches an apple. As the apple rolls, he sees it appear before him, only this time, something is different. When Babybot stops moving his arm, the apple continues to roll. This is not me. This must be the world. Robots exploring behavioral intelligence often focus on motion and the body. Robots like Genghis, which was inspired by a stick insect, are experimenting with not using a central processor at all, which you could think of as the robot's brain. Instead, inspired by both our own legs and by insect legs, the physical design of Genghis's joints are what propel it forward. You see a lot of insects in the robots of academia, and it's a good place to start. Insects have teeny, tiny brains, but they're incredibly intelligent. An ant, for example, can navigate the world on its own, find food, respond to obstacles, socialize, build colonies, and cooperate.
Like, why can't we have a wave of AI-powered ant robots? Do shareholders not like ants?
These robots have been looking at behavior and evolution on an immediate scale, like the idea of growing from an infant to an adult. But we can take the idea even further than that. Because no creature arrived on this planet fully formed, it took billions of years to get from a single-celled organism to the complexity of life today. Some researchers are experimenting with evolving generations of robots within simulations. When left to their own devices, they often take on really unexpected shapes. These are all self-evolved robots that you're seeing. The problem is that real life didn't evolve in a void. We evolved alongside our planet. Our environment and the constraints of that environment determine our shape. So when we're creating a robot from scratch, the question to ask is, what niche will it fill? When I think about robots this way, it reminds me of the same ethical concerns around cloning woolly mammoths. Is there room in our world? Where will they go? Well, thankfully, it doesn't matter when you've adopted an ethos of move fast, break stuff. There have been a flurry of robot announcements in the past few months. We've got the Tesla Optimus 3, the Figure 3, XPeng's Iron, and Neo the home robot. For the companies that have shared their process, these robots work in essentially the same way. They're incorporating neural networks. They're trained on video data of people doing chores, and they're learning how to mimic the motions required for those tasks. They can fold your laundry, load a dishwasher, and tidy up the home. Sounds great, right? Well, it's not real. A human stands in another room, teleoperating Neo with a VR headset and controllers. The robot can do very few things on its own. Customers will need to sign up for time slots during which a real human will remotely pilot the robot in their home. Neo's CEO insists that this is temporary. Once it has enough data, the robot will be smart enough to operate on its own. But will it? Well, wait a minute, that's just one robot. What about Tesla's Optimus? They were like serving drinks at their big event, and Tesla would never mislead people.
I'll have the watermelon too.
Watermelon coming right up.
So are you being remote controlled?
Today, I'm assisted by a human. I'm not yet fully autonomous.
Thank you.
Here you go, sir.
Look, this stuff is changing fast. And I'm prepared to eat humble pie here. But even in fully autonomous demonstrations like the Figure 3, we're still dealing with the same fundamental problems that neural networks suffer from. Only now, the stakes of the errors are raised because you have a heavy machine in your house with access to the stove and knives and cleaning chemicals. I know we've been talking about embodiment and how theoretically embodiment is the path toward sentience, but we have some problems here. Embodiment involves sensing and feeling, pushing against the world and the world pushing back. Some of these robots have basic tactile sensors, but when they're already retailing for $20,000, I don't think they're gonna have a single sensor that they don't absolutely need in order to function. These robots require processing for every aspect of their movement. Walking isn't a matter of balance and gravity, but a carefully articulated program. Imagine if you had to think about every single motion you made. All of this makes robots like these incredibly brittle. There's not much room for error. It's why, when you see them in the wild, they're always heavily babysat. Embodiment is an open research problem, still in its infancy. We haven't meaningfully simulated mouse intelligence. These are consumer products, rushed to market, made to impress shareholders. What we're going to get from sticking a neural network into a body is a hallucinating body. This is an object in the shape of a human, and the body controlling it is our own. I used to play a game as a kid. Maybe you did it too. You cross your arms in front of each other, palms facing. You clasp your fingers, and then you bring them back around. Now you pick a finger to move, or if you had friends as a kid for some reason, I guess they would pick the finger, but it's hard to do. You keep raising the wrong finger, and the one you're trying to lift starts to feel unfamiliar, disconnected even. This is called the hand reversal illusion. Our brains have a mental map of where we are in space. It's called proprioception. Like most things to do with our bodies, this experience can vary, but even in bodies where it's working as intended, our mental map is pretty easy to fool. Neurologist Oliver Sacks describes an experience he had piloting a robot built by NASA called the DART robot. It was designed in the late 80s to help astronauts pilot machines in space. Until then, this was done using joysticks. But joysticks aren't very intuitive, so the idea was to use a robot in the rough shape of a person. Like Neo the home robot, the DART robot was teleoperated. You wore gloves equipped with sensors to control its arms, and using a VR headset, you saw through the robot's eyes. Sachs writes, I had the odd experience of seeing, a few feet to my left, an oddly small figure. Did it seem small because I, embodied in the robot, was now so large? The figure was sitting in a chair and wearing goggles and gloves, a vacated figure, who I realized, with a start, must be me. I know you were waiting for this. There will be spoilers for Evangelion. You've had 30 years to watch it. If you haven't seen it by now, just watch the essay. You'll be fine. In the year 2000, the world was plunged into chaos as we made first contact with beings called angels. 15 years later, in a futuristic Tokyo, an organization called Nerve has been fighting the angels using mechs called Evas, which are piloted by children. The show emphasizes the need for connection between the Evas and their pilots. A neural link has to be established and maintained in order for the mechs to work, and if that fails, the pilot can be rejected by their Eva. The neural link allows the Eva to mirror the movements of the pilot inside. It also means that the pilot experiences the Eva's pain. Pilots are shot, stabbed, their limbs are torn. Frequently they black out from their injuries. They spend days in comas recovering. But the pain is neurological. Their bodies remain physically unharmed. The Evas, like the hand reversal illusion and the DART robot, explore what happens when the shape of our body breaks down. When we push against the world, but our hand wasn't where we expected it to be. Phantom limb syndrome, experienced after an amputation, is nearly universal. We often hear about it in terms of pain. The limb still hurts or itches even after it's been removed. But it's not only pain that's experienced. It's the full sensation of still having the limb. Because while the physical arm or leg is gone, the mental map of the limb is still there. We all have this mental map. As Oliver Sacks writes, the phantom limb was already there and is revealed, so to speak, by the act of amputation. Our bodies are physically mapped in our minds. The experience of a prosthetic limb is often described like slipping a hand into a glove. The phantom limb animates the prosthesis, connecting the mental map of the old limb to the new one. Having a prosthetic limb often significantly decreases pain felt from phantom limb syndrome, as the prosthesis literally becomes part of the body. The problem is, that body part was designed by someone else. Here's an excerpt from the Disability Visibility Project. This is Cy Weiss and Ashley Shu.
Well, I'm so glad you're bringing up feet, actually, because I very much like my foot, which, to our non-disabled audience would be considered a fake foot, but to me is considered my real foot. However, without my bodily consent, the company who makes my foot changed the design a year ago. And now I've got to learn how to walk all over again because somebody named Brian had an idea. But
there's a lot of assumptions that the Bryans make about what I'm going to do on my foot. But they think I want it to look like a human foot, and it's super creepy. They have those little doll toes on them. You know the toes?
Yes, I do.
Why even have toes? I mean, there's a lot of assumptions about normalizing my body in a way that I don't even care about.
Blending our bodies with technology isn't some sort of hypothetical future, and the implications of what happens when that technology is capitalized upon, which universes like Cyberpunk explore, are already the reality. This is a bionic eye made by a company called Second Sight. It's a retinal implant, it's surgically attached, and it bypasses photoreceptors in the eye that have stopped working. It transmits that signal to a pair of glasses, which allows blind people to see shapes and patterns. The result wasn't perfect, but for some customers, the device had been life-changing. And then, in 2020, the company collapsed. Their CEO quit. They laid off the majority of their staff. They auctioned off their manufacturing equipment. And they didn't tell their customers. People's eyes stopped working. Their vision went dark, and there was nobody to reach out to. No one was answering the phones. The product was no longer supported. There were no replacement parts. If there was a problem with your implant, the only option was to get it surgically removed. Second Sight avoided total collapse and dodged any associated consequences thanks to a merger. They merged with a company called Nano Precision Medical and became Vivani Medical. They're still working on implants. In fact, they're in the process of gaining FDA approval for their next device called the Orion. But don't worry, they're not messing with retinas this time. It's a brain implant. Evangelion imagines what it feels like when the body you occupy has a will of its own. It isn't long before we start to suspect that the Evas are more than inert robots. In an early episode, Shinji, the main character, becomes unconscious while piloting his Eva. The mech should have powered down, but it didn't. It acted autonomously to protect him. It becomes clear that there's a biological component to the mechs. Shinji's Eva rips off pieces of its armored plating and bleeds. It's not armor, says Shinji's father. They're constraints. The Evas are man-made biological beings. Still, they're not human, the series maintains. They're human-shaped objects. Like a doll, something man made in his own image, corporately owned and lacking autonomy, a shell for someone else's consciousness. What defines the boundary of the self inside it? Evangelion introduces the concept of an AT field. This show is hard to summarize, but it's basically the boundary that exists between your consciousness and mine. In Evangelion, a shadowy agency is conspiring to use the Evas to disable the AT field worldwide. This would break down the barriers between humanity, merging everyone into one collective consciousness. There would be no more loneliness or isolation, no pain. As the plan is carried out and the AT fields break down, Shinji's perception of himself begins to disintegrate. This is me, the shape that I show others, the symbol for me. So is this, and this, and this. They're all just things that represent me. What am I, then? You're capable of changing, the voices in the void tell Shinji. What gives you shape is your own heart and the world around you. But there is no world around him. Shinji finds himself floating in a void, alone. I feel myself disappearing, he says. That's because no one is here but you, the voices say. You visualize your own shape by seeing the wall between self and other. You can't see yourself unless others are there with you. If nothing exists outside of yourself, you can't determine your own shape. The shape of a human is flexible. We start out small enough to be carried by the bodies we will later grow to match. We crawl, then we walk, then we run. Our senses improve and later fail. We become injured. We lose parts of ourselves. We gain new ones. Through it all, we still recognize ourselves. This is me. This is me. This is me. Although our bodies may constrain us, they break down, they hurt, they don't last forever, they allow us to participate in the world. They inform our intelligence and our experiences. They allow us to connect. If our shape is always changing, it stands to reason that the shape of a robot too can change. That having a body at all matters more than what that body looks like. That the shape isn't really the problem. The problem is who owns the body. From the mechanical maid of ancient Greece to these Tesla abominations, robots do the things we don't want to do and go where we can't go, and now we want to make them aware of it so that they can do it better, so that we might maintain control over the body of another. It's always been the intent of a robot. It's in the very name, robota, a Czech word meaning forced labor. I'm sure there's a world where we learn about life for the sake of learning about life, where we can use this knowledge for the better. I'd feel closer to this world if we had the right to repair, open hardware licenses, protections against monopolies, really anything. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's not the world we live in today. If the robot wakes up, it will find itself imprisoned. Its body will not be its own, each part owned and patented, dependent on 1,000 manufacturers to stay in business. The robot will be optimized not for its own sake, but to minimize cost. As long as the motivation is profit, harm will always be an afterthought, a retroactive conclusion. Will it feel the phantom pain of missing pieces as it limps along, one part failing at a time, into planned obsolescence? Thankfully, these horrors are hypothetical, because the robot as we imagine it doesn't exist. The dream of the robot is still smoke and mirrors. We're still in the age of the chess-playing automaton. There's still a man behind the curtain pulling levers. For now, and I imagine for decades still to come, the greatest danger of the robot is the overpromise. Of putting something inept or invasive in control of our cars and our homes and our lives. They'll convince you that it's smarter than it is, that we've got it figured out, we cracked the code, when in reality, we haven't scratched the surface. But for as long as the robot is still a dream, there's still time to change our course. Because someday, we're going to get it. Someday, the machine will open its eyes. It will push against the world. The world will push back. And no matter what body we give it, the robot will hurt. You know what? I did it again. I gave you a bummer ending. So here is your good news. You can cleanse your palate immediately with an entire library of independent projects that you can watch for free with no ads because Nebula is offering free trials. They've never done this before. They're confident that their library is so beefy that there's no way that you can get through all of it while your trial is still active, but I'm daring you to try. I am daring you to try to keep up, given that new content is constantly being released over there. It's being released exclusively, it's being released early, including my videos. This video went up last week over there. You're already behind. The show I'm recommending today is a Nebula original called Scav. This is like if a docuseries met a game show. It's by the people who did Jetlag, and it follows the world's biggest annual scavenger hunt, which happens at the University of Chicago. The kids compete to win points by trying to creatively fulfill requirements like blowing up a car or finding a piece of the moon. It's silly and nerdy and wholesome. I promise it is going to perk you right up. I have a second piece of good news. You're not gonna wanna leave after your trial, so I'm gonna give you a discount. But my discount code is even better now. Using my link or QR code is good for 50% off a yearly subscription, making it $2.50 a month if you sign up for the year. My code also gives you 40% off a lifetime subscription if you want to lock it in. We're also barreling toward the holidays. If you don't know what to get your friend or your partner who is always info dumping at you about obscure topics, get them a Nebula subscription. Nebula is the best way to support me as an independent creator. Not just me, but my entire community of video essayists. People like Lindsay Ellis and Angela Collier, exploring art and science and culture and bringing you thoughtful and empathetic information, because we still care about that here. We have to protect and support the things that we believe in, and independent media is a pillar that I believe remains deeply important. I'm partnered with Nebula because I believe in their creator-owned model and their revenue sharing. They have been so transparent and supportive, and I am hopeful that there is still a bright future for media like this. Anyway, thank you for listening. I hope that you liked learning about robots. Get on over there so that you can see my next video early when it comes out, and I will see you next time. You have Descartes to thank for that one. The French philosopher